And it looks like we're live on air, Steve-O.
Mark, how you doing?
Good, man. I'm coming to you from the Park Hyatt in Auckland, New Zealand. So,
well, doesn't that sound fancy?
If I open this curtain, you won't be able to see anything because it's absolutely, well,
blinding.
Here's the point. Sunny is sunny, and I'm got a full view of the city here, and down here for the week. It's my wife's last week of work, and so she's gone into the office there to, everyone to pat her on the back and everything before she goes on maternity leave. So, that's what brings us here, and I've been up since 2 a.m. this morning.
Lovely.
Which in a hotel room's not the best.
Is it cold out?
Pardon?
Is it cold out?
Nah, warm is warm. Like I went swimming this weekend past in the ocean.
Yeah, because the last couple of weeks you were bundled up a little bit.
Yeah, nah. She's got warm very quickly. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Danny. Lorenus. Hans. Oh, where is Danny? Mark? Danny, I'm in the Park Hyatt in Auckland today. Is where we're at, and this is some of the benefits of being an MVP, because how I paid for my accommodation last night was on loyalty points with Park Hyatt from all the times I've stayed in the Park Hyatt in Seattle, and accrued loyalty for staying overnight. So I was actually freebie on the house, the accommodation last night, and I think the first time I started earning loyalty points was in Houston, Texas, with Park Hyatt. So
we're going to see everybody's loyalty bank balances all deplete from the last year. Nobody's really adding to them very much.
No. I mean, heck, for me, it's been the first time in 10 years that I haven't flown. And, I've always maintained a very high status with the airlines. So when I was in Australia, I would go, their top tier with Virgin Australia was platinum. And in any given year that I lived in Australia, I'd go platinum 3 times a year. So when you go that frequently, it's nuts, because one, it meant that all my trips around Australia became business class trips because I just had so many loyalty points, right? I remember, when I was working for a company there was 1,800 staff in the company, and so a bunch of us would be flying from any time around the country. And I would always, 1A was the seat I liked because it was the very first seat on the aircraft. It was in business, and it meant that I was off and bang, I could be, off to my customer. And I can remember sitting there this one day, and the CEO of the company comes on the plane. And of course, company policy was no business class at all. It was always cattle class. She looks at me and goes down to cattle class herself in the back of the plane. And of course, I was business class because they were all upgrade credits. They were never, I was still just flying the minimum from the company perspective, but because for me to fly from Sydney to Perth, that was a over 5-hour flight.
Yeah.
So you made amazing points and stuff on that. And it was it meant that my wife was platinum because I was able to give away 1 platinum membership a year to somebody else. So I mean, both of us were platinum, and then I still had another platinum on top of that. And then, then they started sending Dom Perignon to me as Christmas gifts, because they love the frequent flyer. So
yeah.
But why I led down that path is because now, with coming back to New Zealand, I logically wasn't in a loyalty program in New Zealand because I'd been living in England, And so just before lockdown, I achieved gold under the Air New Zealand airline. I was like, woo, now I've got access to all the lounges and stuff going forward. And under Air New Zealand, that's decent. Haven't traveled once since achieving it. And it's due to expire.
Almost feel like going to the airport just to hang out at the lounge because you can, right?
Totally ripped off. Took out first world problems, right?
Yeah. So we were talking about a couple of things in the pre-call that I thought might be interesting to our folks here. One about how cool Customer Insights is.
Yeah.
And then separately, but kind of related, just this idea about expensive appearing applications and how, the typical customer and even individual, we make our first impression on something based on its price.
Yeah.
And the return on that investment is a secondary part of that. The first part is that price and how that hits us. And it's amazing how many times over the years, and you and I have both run into customers that the first thing they hear is a price for something. And if that price hits them as just insanely high, you cannot even make the ROI conversation, even if it's 10x ROI. It's like they can't get beyond that first impression of, oh, wow, that's expensive. It's an interesting phenomenon with people that they just have a tendency not to be able to look beyond. It's like I was telling you, if you could buy $10 bills for $5 a piece, you'd spend every penny you had without thinking about it. You wouldn't even bat an eye. But there are people out there that would say, give me 20. Just give me 20 of those. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to try and challenge. It's a sales challenge. And it's probably one faced by some of the folks trying to sell customer insights, because at first blush, at least for smaller customers, it feels like, wow, that's a lot of money. And then you get into this whole conversation.
And the thing is, I've spent the last 2 to 3 weeks now on customer insights. So I'm getting deeper and deeper. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Prashant and Mordue. Good to have you here. And what's happening is that the deeper you go into it, you're starting to realize that customer insights is absolutely a phenomenal product. I often get people say to me, BizApps is so big now. If you were starting today, what would you invest your time in? Now, I don't know if it's because customer insights are very top of mind for me at the moment, but customer insights has so much upside for somebody that gets in, learns the skill, and master it. And the beauty is, it's a finished application from Microsoft. Now, when I say a finished application, it's like Dynamics 365 sales, right? In other words, you can switch it on, you can add data, and you're good to go, right? You don't, if you took a Canvas app, for example, or a Power App, of it, whether it's model driven as well, you've got to build up all the entity relations. You've got to model that all out. You've got to create UI. That Dynamics 365 Customer Insights is built, and it is phenomenal in what's achievable with it. And that, any company that has acquired a bunch of companies will have inherited a bunch of legacy IT around data, right? So let's say, one of the big case studies is Campari. Have you heard of Campari?
Yeah, the water or wine or something like that.
Well, Campari, is often a Negroni. It'll be the spirit that goes into a Negroni, or I'm not even sure if they own Vermouth, which is vermouth, which is part of a martini. They're a big Italian, in the high-end spirits. Well, they've bought 20-odd companies over the last 20 years, and one of them is Aperol Spritz. Now, I don't know if you've had an Aperol Spritz, quite an orange drink. In Europe, everybody's into Aperol Spritz because in the summer, it's, it's like a large wine glass, something that you'd have a red wine in. It is vivid orange, and it's a mixture of Aperol Spritz, which is kind of like the unique liqueur in it. It is sparkling wine, or Prosecco specifically, a little bit of soda water, and over ice. And so it's a big drink, but man, it's tasty. And like, if you're in the Cinque Terre in Italy, or, in any outdoor cafe, you'd have one of these and you'd be putting them away, and they're fantastic. Anyhow, so that brand was one of the ones that Campari brought. Now, the problem they have is that they, how do people sell alcohol in that high end of the market? It's by getting bartenders to propose the drink to the customer. Why don't you try one of these, right?
Yeah.
And of course, so they want to have this amazing relationship with not just the bar owners, but the bartenders, right? The people mixing the drink, the mixologists. And so they had all these disparate data sets, and they bring that all into customer insights. And all of a sudden, they can be very targeted on who their key mixologists are, serving in those bars, that type of thing. So they can invest a lot more in, stocking them, incentivizing them, all those different types of things. So they're one of the great case studies of it, which is a company that's gone through buying a lot of other companies over time, and each of those companies with it comes with its own data set. You know, I was talking the other day to the CEO of a Softomotive, the founder of Softomotive, not the CEO because it's now owned by Microsoft. Sachi is now the CEO of Softomotive. But the founder of Softomotive in Italy, I was chatting with him. You know, 15 years ago, he started this product. And over that time, they've built this massive database of customers, which, of course, instantly are now Microsoft's customers. Now, you imagine, you know, you've got all sorts of data points of people that have purchased. There'd be all the licensing contracts. There would be, you know, does this company always upgrade each year and buy more? You know, all that kind of data would be sitting in their database systems, whatever they are, whether that's Oracle, whether that's,
a lot of commonality with the Microsoft database, you know.
Yeah. And so
people are probably in both.
Exactly. And so the beauty of customer insights is, hey, leave your data wherever it is if you're still sweating assets for whatever reason, you know, because they might have some other software running off that's, you can't just turn it off, because by turning it off, you break 15 points of process. You know, you imagine even your own software, you've got a licensing system, right, that hooks into a customer record of all your customers at some point. If you just decided tomorrow, hey, that's customer data, I'm going to move it into a different system, or your licensing engine probably would break and fall over, you know? And so those 100,000 customers that are currently on Rapid Start you would have trouble linking that across. And so what this does is says, hey, leave the data there, but what we'll do is we'll create a profile and use the data that we need from those systems to provide the ability to act at the right time on this information. So, you know, one of the examples I give is that, let's say you've surveyed your customers for the last 5 years. You've run a CSAT score with them, and you've got a, you know, an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10 for the last, you know, 5 years. Now that's interesting data, but what if their last survey of you, they'd only given you a 2, right? That type of data, you want to know that, because you can take action on the likelihood that this customer is on the way out the door. Even though their average might be high, their most recent engagement might be very low.
Yeah.
And so that's what Customer Insight addresses.
You know, I think there's 2 things that are interesting about Customer Insights. One thing is you don't really care what the customer has. And, you know, so many of us that have come from the Dynamics world, you know, we're coming in trying to sell them Dynamics 365 and rip out whatever it is they're using, Salesforce, whatever it is. And that was our only game. If they didn't want to do that, we were like, okay, well, we'll check back next year.
Yeah.
But, you know, Customer Insights, leading with that, almost, it doesn't matter, because now you're not selling Dynamics. You're just selling this thing. And if they've got Salesforce, like you said, who gives a shit? You got Salesforce, perfect. We don't care what you have, and we're not trying to make you get rid of anything that you have.
Yeah.
We just want to attach this to all of these things you have and give you something else, but we don't want you to change any of the stuff, do anything. So it's an interesting sales proposition. But the other thing you and I were talking about is, I mean, it's really easy to think, well, I'm going to just spin me up a Customer Insights practice and go out there and make that exact pitch and get in a bunch of doors. But you got to know something. I mean, you got to have some skills, and that's what kind of kept me away from. We looked at it. We were in the pilot. We were in the pilot when that thing first launched, and through several iterations. And I always thought, man, this thing's got huge potential, but it's just a little too foreign.
It needs a lot of data, right? It needs a lot of data, and therefore the type of people, you know, the work you're going to go in and run with the customer is around solving problems that their data has their answer to, but they just don't know how to get to that data. So it's kind of like, it's not that they don't have the data, it's that they can't interpret the data. And of course, with modern technology, like a customer data platform, which is what this is, it allows you to get, you know, for years we talked about, and, you know, in CRM land, this 360-degree view of the customer. That's what we need. It was kind of the panacea that was sold at what Dynamics CRM provided. But you don't need the 360-degree view of the customer on a screen, right? Because I could know everything about their cases, their survey feedback, about their buying habit. But if my role in the company is purely customer satisfaction, what use is all their financial data to me? I don't need that. So although a company wants a profile of 360-degree view, this department in the organization might only want to grab this bit off that profile. This part of the company might only want to grab this part off that profile. So the idea is it's not so much bringing it into an interface that somebody can eyeball it, although that is possible. It's more than the actions that people can take. And so the big sell, of course, for Microsoft in this is that they've got this whole ecosystem of platforms and software behind it that they then can take action with. So you could go, okay, now we've got that insight. We need an app that notifies the person that's checking somebody onto a bus or onto an aircraft, has this exact bit of information right when they go, hello,
they're not
Steve,
scrolling through pages of information to find what they need.
They need the piece of exact, precise information at the right trigger point that's going to make that customer go, wow.
Yeah, here's what that first-class customer drinks.
Yeah, I'm a segment of one. And that's what it really creates, is this concept of I can be targeted to from a business based on my unique, whether I was unsatisfied in a survey recently, whether I have a propensity to buy more, like in the real estate industry, my profile might show that my equity is increased over this period of time by X. And, I have a propensity to buy another condo. This is a hot prospect to talk about. Hey, what about, growing your portfolio as an example?
Hey, Scott. Hey, Paul. One of the other things that I thought was interesting, at least early when I was looking at it, was it didn't require, because I think what's kept a lot of people from trying to analyze their data is the reality that their data is crap, right? They know their database is full of duplicate information or dirty data. Yeah. And it felt like this tool, as part of that matching, merging, et cetera, process, almost kind of just dealt with it as it was.
We don't care. That's it.
Fine, we don't care. You got 20 duplicates in here. We're looking at that. We're going to turn them all into one.
Yep.
You don't have to clean up your data to get the value out of the data. And that, to me, was going to be a huge selling point, because every company out there knows their data is dirty.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them would think, man, I'd love to have those insights, but our data is crap and garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
But this thing, you can actually put garbage in.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? And after acquiring businesses, right, companies are going to have dirty data. I remember one of the first big CRMs I built, and when I say big, me and my team built a full payroll system inside Dynamics, all tax compliant and everything, right?
Yep.
Stupid. This is when I was like, Dynamics can do anything. We can build anything. And they come to us, can you build a payroll system? And absolutely we can.
As long as they paid you to do it.
They paid, except for the GFC hit through that process. And of course, then they couldn't pay. But that's another story. But what was amazing here is that company, the guy, I knew the owner very well. He had been my boss in a former company I'd worked for. And he bought this business. It was a recruitment business that specialized in temporary job placements. Yeah. In other words, there's a big, there's a big game on at the stadium. We need 1,000 wait staff, and we just need them for the time that the game's on.
An afternoon.
No longer our employee, right? They're gone. So it's that type of staffing. So temporary, non-perm roles. So he bought this business, and in his due diligence, they had an access database that had 100,000 candidates in it, until we looked at it and found out he had less than 10,000 candidates that had been duplicated time after time after time after time, because not knowing that, right? And so most businesses through an acquisition process are going to have this dirty type data. But, customer insights comes into its own, and definitely larger businesses. I don't think you'd sell it to an SMB space unless they had a shit ton of customers. Yeah. It's like, I'll give you an example. Some of the case studies I'm looking at, I think, and don't quote me on this because I haven't looked at it in detail, it's around $1,800 for 100,000 profiles. So it's not licensed based on the number of staff accessing the data. It's licensed based on the number of profiles in the system.
Which is not the number of records, because a profile could be a combination of 10 different.
50 records, right? It could be 50 records being combined into a single record. That's a profile record,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
As we talked about all that dirty data. So, and then $1,800, I think, gives you around 100,000 records. And you're like, it's not like my comment was, mate, if I was in a business that size, I'd be chucking it on my credit card. If I could all of a sudden, create a phenomenal return on investment for the business, the approval of it would be pretty straightforward.
Mark, let us know why you think that is while Mark continues.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. So here's the rub on it. The customers at Microsoft are landing in this space have 50 million profiles.
Yeah.
80 million profiles. 30 million profiles.
Yeah, add zeros. Yeah.
Look at the deals that are being done. And of course, the amazing thing is they don't care if it sits in Salesforce, as you say. Doesn't matter where it sits, the data. It's the fact is we're creating this unified profile that then gives a company incredible power to, make sure their VIP customers' lifetime spend become even higher. Make sure that their potential churn customers are rescued and brought back, from the brink, so to speak. And as they say, it's always cheaper to keep a customer than to create a new customer. And then all of a sudden it allows them to target whole new segments of the market based on profiles of their existing data sets. So when
you think about $1,800 for 100,000 profiles, and you got somebody with 30 million, so that's what 300 times $1,800 cost. But then we get back to that conversation we kind of started with, is the price versus the ROI. And these big companies are not hesitating because they're getting the ROI in a lot of ways, as you were talking about before, of massively reduced marketing costs by not marketing to people that aren't prospects.
Yeah.
Keeping customers happy and that sort of stuff. And I got to think they can actually put a dollar value to that result to compare against what they're paying. Mm-hmm. And that's what's keeping them going on the thing. So another one of those things that I think a lot of people would look at and go, "Ooh, that's expensive." I got 1 million contacts. Geez, that's going to be like $18,000 a month. That's a lot of money. But yeah, then you got to kind of run that out.
Yeah.
So Mark says something here about Microsoft revenue growing 12% on an annualized basis, down from 13% growth the prior quarter. I don't know if 1% is enough to go get freaky about. But still, looks like they're still making huge money.
Well, here's the thing, when I think it was Jeff that I had on the call, as in on a podcast, just back a piece.
Yeah, York.
Yeah, Jeff York. And this is the thing, he said it's kind of like what Microsoft have found through COVID is an anti-trend type thing is happening, where a lot of businesses are struggling. The acceleration of digital transformation has been 3 years condensed into 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. And so therefore Microsoft is doing very, very well. The BizApps revenue is $3 billion was the recent analyst report, was the BizApp revenue piece per annum. I think it's
Jeff York, for those of you who don't know, is the CFO of BizApps.
Yeah, he's a chief financial
money guy.
of BizApps, and he's been doing it.
Alyssa in marketing, you got James in product and in engineering, and you got Jeff in the money, the dollar side. And do we have a new sales leader yet?
Yeah, we do. He's
that's right.
Is he French? I think he's a French chap.
Yeah.
From memory.
Haven't heard much about him.
No, well, I assume with COVID, there's a whole issue of relocating into Seattle, how that all works and stuff. I don't know that it'd be just a streamlined process.
Well, Microsoft recently announced that employees can work from home forever.
Yeah.
That was it was talked about in one of our private channels that you don't ever use terms like never and forever. But they did. They said, what, if you get approval from your manager that you have a job that you can do from home, you can do it from home forever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting too, because last time you and I were out at the campus, massive construction going on of huge buildings and
a whole bunch had been leveled, right? And new ones being built, which was a 3-year build project.
Oh yeah, you got to think, and so they're sitting here watching out the window these massive new structures being built on the campus while at the same time telling all of these people that we're going to fill those cubicles that they can work from home forever.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what they're going to have out there. Kind of a big, maybe they may just open some of those buildings or finish some of those buildings and leave them closed.
Yeah, well, who knows, right? I think that one of the things that a lot of these big companies are also realizing, though, that staff are becoming overworked while they're working from home. Because, everyone thought that staff working from home, they can't be watched over by a manager. They're going to slack off. They're not going to perform. And the opposite has happened. What's happening is that staff are not switching off. I'm talking with folks from Microsoft and other big organizations, and they're pulling 15, 16-hour days because they're not switching off. They're starting at Sparrow when they get up in the morning. They're going hard all day long and right into the evenings. And of course, they're not traveling or anything like that. There's kind of like no breakup. And so therefore their brain is just on for this massive period of time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is people are not taking holidays like they used to. Right? They're not taking, long weekends or whatever because they don't want to travel and get risk of COVID or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing else to do. A lot of folks aren't even going outside. They got nothing else to do.
Yep.
Might as well go work.
Yep.
Nothing else to do. If you're working for Microsoft, you gotta hit your scorecard. So, might as well go work.
Yeah, and it is. Mark, you're right. It is unhealthy, but one of the things in discussion with my wife, I'm saying is that I think that what will happen is that there'll be a bunch of research done now on how does work in a non-officed world.
Yeah, we had the research before because that had been floating around out there for a while before all this about how people work from home was more productive than when working in the office.
Yeah.
But now we've got a much larger sampling. And I think what we also have now are people that never wanted to work from home. Before, the people that work from home were mostly people that wanted to work from home, asked to work from home, or allowed to work from home. Now, people that never wanted to work from home are being forced to work from home. So you got a whole different kind of population now working from home than we had before. And I'll bet those numbers get skewed a little differently.
Yeah. And it's interesting because if you look at history a bit, it was only about 120 years ago that nobody would work in an office as such, or very few people. You'd have to be in like a lawyer, an accountant, or something like that. Everybody worked on the land. And then I know Ford is held up as one of the key instigators of this, created the industrial, the whole industrial revolution came about where factory working became a big thing. And that's where the 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 4:30 day came about, is that it was locked into the whistle blew, you started working. When it blew again, you had a smoko. When it blew again, you're back to work. And it was all controlled by the company, and people came in and put their bolt on or screwed the nut or whatever it was. And then we went into the information age, and the information age, of course, has been massive around bringing everybody into big cities and big office blocks and things like that. But
a lot of those same principles still applied,
Totally, but they're industrial revolution principles, not necessarily modern day. So, will it drive the scenario that people, that companies go, you know what? 4 days a week is all that is going to be the employee week now. 3 days, whatever it might be, and they take measures to make sure their staff are not working in other days of the week, which wouldn't be hard, right? If you control a network, you can pause it for a period.
And when you work from home, like you said, company really has no idea how many hours you may be putting in or not putting in. I saw on Amazon recently or a while back, they sell this little device you can put your mouse on that'll just shake it for you.
Oh, yeah.
So it gives you the continuous appearance of being online and active when you're not. So there's clearly people out there that are doing that.
But they'd be the edge case, right? Because what I'm noticing, is that some of these big companies now are giving days off, like fully paid days off, like this week's it's all hands off, and I know people outside of Microsoft that are working in these big type companies, and they're realizing that the mental health of their staff and it was way different than when they were inside the office,
Yeah.
And so they're proactively going, you know what, we're going to create off days where there's no business, there's no appointments, there's no engagement happening, and they're wrapping it around weekends. Shutdown. Yeah.
Forced shutdown.
Yep.
It's interesting because I think that what so many people in the past had done, the measure of your performance at a company, a big part of that measure was hours worked.
Yeah, visibility. Not even that you're working, just that you're seen to be working.
Yeah, it's your arrival, it's your punching in at 8 a.m., it's your punching out for lunch, punching in and punching out at 5. And there was almost, I know this is true in lots of places, my ex-wife used to go in early at one of her jobs. She went in at 7 instead of 8. She was first one there by an hour.
Yep.
Because of traffic, she preferred that. So she clocked out at 4, when everybody else was clocking out at 5. And every day she'd go clock out at 4, and everybody turned to give her some kind of a sneer about leaving early, even though she worked just as many hours as they did. But this whole mentality that you're being paid for the number of hours that you are on our clock is another thing left over, I think, from that industrial revolution that is still deep seated in a lot of organizations and even employees, coworkers' minds, that in this new world where you have no idea how many hours I'm working, you need a different form of measurement of my value. I mean, and I want it too, because if I'm an employee somewhere, how the hell am I going to get a raise? You can't see me working late every night till 6 o'clock when the boss leaves, he looks over and sees me in my cubicle working. You can't see me at home working until 8 or 9 o'clock. How do I get the credit that I need to be able to move up in the organization, get the raise when I'm not seen? These are the things that I think have got to be still sorted out. And some of the things are easy, right?
I think that Microsoft, to some degree, started addressing this five or more years ago. I tell you what I noticed when I moved to Australia and went into Microsoft there, out at North Ryde in Sydney, they had a large office complex, multiple stories of a building. And the country manager arranged a full fit out, and she reduced from memory the floor area by 1 floor of the building. They gave up the lease, and she went to full open office. Even herself, she never had a permanent office. And everybody was told there's now less desks in the office than there are employees in the area.
Yeah, right.
So don't come to the office unless you really need to have a meeting, that type of thing. And one thing they did is that nobody is expected to be in the office by 9, because if you had kids and you're dropping off at school, and often parents would leave it around, 2 in the afternoon because they'd go pick their kids up and stuff. But they stopped measuring whether you attended, and they started measuring 100% output. You have KPIs, you have measurements around output, and we'll measure the outputs. And what happened? They didn't need that space.
Some positions have kind of always had that, right? Like sales, right? I mean, if you're not closing deals, I don't care how many hours you're working, you're fired.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter how many hours you work. If you're not closing deals, you're fired. So there's my metric. How many deals are you closing? Period. End of story. I don't care if you did it all in an hour or if you spent 80 hours in the week to accomplish it. I've got a clear metric. But then you get all these other positions where the metric is not so clear. People that are supporting that sales, writing proposals or whatever it is they might be doing. But
that all can be metriced, right? Because if you think of any sports game, there's the final whistle, which was what the score was when we said the game finished. Yeah. But there was a whole bunch of metrics that happened all the way through the game. You can't foul on somebody. You can't, run outside the boundaries. There's a whole
number of yards run, number of catches, number of interceptions, all
that activity base can still be measured, right?
Well, that's how fantasy football works.
Right.
The fantasy sports, which is huge over here in the U.S., is you're betting on a player, not a team. Yep. And your team could lose horribly, but if your player met his numbers, you move up. So it really was kind of breaking it away from the overall concept and getting down to an individual metrics. Right. But I think that's something that a lot of people are still dealing with, and now I'm talking about more on the management side of the business,
Yeah.
but also that employee, you know, if I've been sent to work from home and I don't have clear metrics for my job,
Yep.
how will you know, Mr. Boss, how will you know if I'm exceeding them, and whether, I mean, so I can ask for a raise or a promotion or something? How do I even get there? I think there's probably a bunch of folks working from home right now that are just, you know, walking on a treadmill,
Yeah.
basically, and have no idea, you know, if they're even being seen, you know.
Totally. I just noticed there a comment from Debbie early on. Why did they remove reports from Dynamics 365 apps? Was it to encourage using Power BI? And I think Power BI is where the investment around reporting went. And, you know, each of Microsoft's applications up to that point had various charting tools and reporting tools, but nothing was as sophisticated as what Power BI was. And so they were like, rather than keep building, and, you know, back in the day, the whole, you know, fetch XML when we went online, and the whole chart building was quite a thing. But yeah, they've totally over time not continued to spend money in that area when they felt they've had a reporting tool like Power BI that's quite robust.
We're going to see this, you know, the Dynamics 365 out of the box reporting tool hasn't been touched since version 4, probably.
Yeah.
It's a pretty archaic, and as soon as you break it open, you feel like, whoa, I just went back to 1980. It really has not been touched or advanced, and with Power BI out there, I don't see them doing it. We're going to see the same thing happen with some of the other things, I think, over time. I think workflows, you know, the classic workflow. I mean, they're going to support them, and they say they're going to support them indefinitely because they kind of have to, because the whole world's built on them.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to eventually see something similar. They're just going to stop investing.
Yep.
They're not going to turn it off. They'll just stop investing.
That's
and
it.
All the investment will go somewhere else. And if you want, you know, modern new stuff, you'll have no choice but to move off of something that doesn't work. You know, the reporting, unlike, say, workflows, there's not an issue of parity. Power BI is vastly more sophisticated than the out-of-the-box reporting tool, you know, ever was. You can't say the same for workflows yet. They still haven't hit parity, you know, but they're still not going to invest in the old one.
There's no synchronous or workflows, right?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of little bits and pieces and nits and nats down in the corners that aren't where they need to be yet.
Yeah.
But they could probably, you know, I mean, I think the reason she's saying turned off reporting. I haven't seen that yet, but then, to be honest, I don't think I've looked for reporting out of the box in years. so I wouldn't even know if they removed it, but it wouldn't surprise me that, you know, they've worked hard to get customers to move to Power BI. You know, once they reach a certain number, I'm sure they're comfortable enough to say, you know what, here's how we get the rest of them to move. We just turn that shit off.
Yeah.
You know, and force them.
Even as you're seeing there, it's all they do is don't provide the back-end interface necessary for it. They can still let the front end light up as whatever was built can stay there. Yeah. But all you got to do is, you know, create new, remove that functionality, and all of a sudden people can no longer create new. And
Mark sparked a good point there also about Classic. I mean, I cannot work on a customer tenant doing almost anything without having to go back and forth between Maker and Classic. Yeah. I cannot complete a customer project in one or the other. I have to go back and forth right now. And that's frustrating, because there are things that you can't do in Classic because they don't exist in Classic. They're only in Maker.
Yep.
And then Maker doesn't have things that only exist in Classic. Sometimes Maker will kick you back over to Classic for certain things. Sometimes it doesn't do anything, and you just have to know, oh shit, I have to go back to Classic to do that. And so they definitely have a ways to go on the parity.
Yeah.
The parity battle there. And I look forward to it.
You know, where the investment goes to cost to benefit, because they're running a heck of a lot of telemetry these days to know how many people that this is a massive issue for, as in compared to the licensing that they're generating on it, etc., and to know the difference to where they need to fix quickly. So
yeah, well, I think they probably get you know, maybe a little bit of a skewed, because if they were to look at me, they would say, oh, this guy works in Classic half the time.
Mm.
Well, I'm in Classic half the time because I can't do that shit in Maker.
Yeah.
So don't think that, oh, here we've got a preference for Classic. It's not a preference. I just can't do this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so you hate to think they're thinking, oh, we don't need to hurry on this because plenty of people seem to be happy with Classic. We're not. We're just stuck. We have no choice. You're not giving us a way.
You can imagine the product team that's responsible for that area would have a big, long backlog list that they're prioritizing off all the time and going, you know, we want to put that to bed. We want that one to go away, or we want to retire that bit of interface. What do we need to do to finish and make it so nobody's going back there? You know, that we can
see it, and you see it's interesting. It seems like a way for them to do it would be, once we've nailed something in Maker completely and it works completely the way it needs to, let's turn off that capability in Classic.
Yeah.
Because right now I'm doing most of the work in Classic because I'm already in there. And a lot of that stuff I could do probably more efficiently in Maker, other than the fact that I know I'm gonna have to bounce back to fucking Classic anyway.
Yeah.
But if they just took shit out, like the form designer, if the form designer is completely up to snuff in Maker, just remove that capability from Classic and force me over to Maker. And then every time you tick off a box, take it out of Classic. Now that's forcing a back and forth behavior, but I already have a back and forth behavior.
Yeah.
You know, at least give me a back and forth that's heading in a single direction.
But do you know what? I think that we're talking about a whole lot of string that's been chucked into and mixed up over time, over what, 18, 16, 17, 18 years now of legacy stuff that when they pull this end, it's just like, you know, I don't know if you've been in, I've gone into projects where they've said, help us out, our CRM just broke and nobody did anything. And you go in there and some clown had admin privileges and they'd gone in and they had deleted a field because we don't use that anymore, not realizing it was tied to an SSRS report that now doesn't run anymore because it was looking for something that doesn't exist, right? And so you pull the
unintended consequences.
I don't want that one anymore, but you don't realize that that string's connected to 5 other things in there that they can't just go, let's cut that piece off or let's take those building blocks out of the mix. You know,
it's like Mark was trying to send us a link, but he doesn't have the ability to do so.
No, you can't do it from in here, Mark. You have to flick it to us via WhatsApp or via WhatsApp. There's that WhatsApp group. I don't know what the WhatsApp group.
I thought there was an admin call last week, PGI with MVPs on some of those capabilities coming, and I need to go back. I had it on, but I was busy doing something else, and so I wasn't really listening. I need to go back and listen to that. But it is interesting, you know, I mean, they've got such a huge team now. It just feels like if you throw enough bodies at it, you should be able to solve, you know, any freaking problem.
Yeah.
You know, but some of these things just seem to persist. And, you know, it's one thing if there's something that you can only do in Classic that isn't really important, like maybe say, for example, the old reports. I don't see them bringing that to the old report capabilities to the new Maker experience, but there's some things that are pretty rudimental that need to be pulled over there.
Yeah.
So what's Mark linking us? Oh, he's sending one for Debbie. Maker needs a back button or cancel. I think it does have a back button, although I've noticed a couple times where I have been working in Maker and got out to a place, I don't remember if it was maybe on a form or something, and there was no way to get back at all. Literally had to go reopen Maker to get back to the top, which that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. I'm not, I'll just log into the web version here of, doesn't automatically.
See, now Mark is further corrupting Debbie down the old path. Not helpful, Mark, not helpful. Just send her a link to Power BI.
Okay.
But no, there's been a couple of times working in Maker experience where I found myself down a dead end path working on something and then there was no getting back to where I came from without literally going back to, you know, start over, you know, at the org. No back button, no, you know, even the browser back button, nothing got me back. Well, I don't even think there was a browser back button, but no way to get back.
Yeah. You can always hit the backspace key, can't you?
No, it wouldn't go back.
Wow.
It was, and they've got some weird things too, where you'll be in the maker experience and you'll click and it'll open another tab to do something. And then if you go back to the previous tab, it's got this, dialogue, you're editing a form in another tab. And that whole thing is just weird. I don't know why they have it doing it that way. It seems like that should all stay within the same tab. Why do I need to go to another tab to do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I saw you you do a post around a doc that was written by damn, it doesn't come to me. It's a new API, a connector you did on LinkedIn.
So that would be an auto post.
Oh, it's not one of your
Do I look like a guy who writes about API connectors?
Well, that's the thing. I was like, wow, Steve's obviously found this one's quite interesting. Oh, here you go. Introducing customer API preview.
Yeah, didn't see that post at all.
Jim Daly wrote it on the 26th of October, and I was like having a read through. It's only in beta at the moment, and because I read it. It's around reducing the to some degree, I think, the dependency on plugins and actions and whatnot.
You read it and thought I wrote it?
No, I didn't know. I knew you didn't write it. I'm just like, you've obviously come across this and thought you needed it for something.
No, I've got some AI running in the background out there, looking for things that might be interesting, and then publishing them out in my name. And
I hear you. Yeah. You're just trying to educate the community, right? And just using technology to do it.
Well, it adds to my number of tweets that I can use for my MVP contribution automatically. It's funny too, because it had stopped working for a while, and I noticed my stats of views and stuff were kind of going down for some reason. I'm like, I wonder what's going on there. And then I found out it wasn't working, turned it back on, and they went back up again. So
Danny's talking about MS bookings there, which is, it's interesting in that I think for the SMB space, this is quite an interesting proposition. So I'll tell you how I've kind of bumped into this, which I don't know that it was necessarily MS bookings, but the same concept. I went to have a bed trim last week, and so I went into the barber, and they were like, "Do you have a booking?" And I'm like, "No, I don't have a booking." They're like, "Yeah, we're full up. You need to go onto our website, fill out the booking, choose your time slot, and you'll be good to go." And so I go onto their website for the barber, right? And wanting me to, I'll paste that in. And
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yep.
Okay, I did too. And so what happened is that I went to their website, and it just had this little booking tool. It took me through which barber did I want to use. Do I have a preference? And oh, by the way, okay, you're having that, pay for it now.
Was it Microsoft Bookings or some other one?
I didn't look, but it did exactly what Microsoft Bookings does that Danny mentions here. Now, this is an interesting thing to me. When I was in the shop and I was talking to the owner then, I was like, tell me about this, and she said to me, well, when COVID happened, they could not do, they're in an industry where everyone kind of paid via cash. You're jumping in, they're serving guys predominantly. Yeah. And, doing a haircut, doing a shave, whatever. And they had to go contactless. So they decided to go website, totally contactless. And they said the upside of it is now nobody cancels their appointment or doesn't do a no-show because they've paid for it.
Yeah, right.
So she goes, like what you saw the other day, every seat is full. They don't have enough seats. They don't have enough staff. They run a good service, obviously, good experience, but now they've
That's a hell of a haircut they gave you.
Wow, look at it, but they're collecting all the money up front, right? And here's a part of COVID. What's Danny saying? With COVID and online meetings, a lot of companies are looking,
Well, I looked at bookings for what I do, and I don't know if this is appropriate to our listeners, but you and I both, I use a tool like that for people to book time on my calendar to have a conversation about something. And we use it for a lot of other things too, but mainly it's booking time on one or more of our calendars for some sort of an online meeting.
Yeah.
And we were using one called Acuity Scheduler.
Yep.
Which was great and had lots of customization capabilities, and it worked fine. And it had an integration with Zoom, so it automatically could create a Zoom meeting for people.
Cool.
But what I really wanted was a Teams option.
Yep.
And you've been using Calendly and been real happy with Calendly, and they had a beta up there for a Teams connector,
which is now no longer beta but full production.
Yep, now full production. It works great. So now I can
fantastic.
Somebody can go to my website, and they can click, and it'll open up. They can pick either Zoom or Teams, which is perfect, because one of the reasons I was sticking with Zoom was because I knew everybody had access to Zoom, but Teams, I didn't really like the web client that much, but now it's gotten better. But now they can pick, and you can do the same thing. You can put a price in there. So I do on my stevemordue.com website, I do ISV consulting.
Yep.
For $500 an hour.
Yeah.
So 1 hour, you can pick my brain, everything you want to know about ISV for $500. And you pay for that. You pay for that when you book the appointment.
Yeah. So what, you got a Stripe integration type thing, right?
Yep. Stripe integration, Teams and Zoom integration. They can make a Teams or Zoom meeting, pay their $500, boom, goes right in my account, shows up on my calendar. Doesn't show up in my calendar until they pay, because but it's a perfect little tool. But I do think Bookings is designed more around the barbershop. Barbershop. It's really designed for barbershop.
It's small, repeatable service type businesses, right?
Yeah.
But look at the examples here that folks are coming through with. Paul there, talking about lots of school divisions using Microsoft Forms to do their contract tracing with, and libraries and stuff with QR codes. Yeah. Danny's talking about MS Bookings with integration to D365 appointment. The thing is, I don't know that I want it to go to D365. I want it to straight into Outlook, right? Yes, I might want to trace or have a record of it over in D365, but is it more that they want to get it into somebody's Outlook calendar?
Yeah, can't you push it over from Outlook easier?
Yeah, as in, man, when was the last time I ever had the old, com client, which I mean still exists, right, for Outlook, but when I was heavily, which was when I was in SalesSpark, using Outlook integration with Dynamics 365 Sales, the new client was all that I was using, and it was doing absolutely fine. I wouldn't dream of putting the com client in and slowing my Outlook down these days.
So Debbie's asking about Sales Teams versus Microsoft Teams, and you're talking about two completely different things there. Yeah, that's definitely going to be an organization level thing, because Sales Teams is an internal construct to Dynamics, right? It's sales or like access teams and things like that.
Yeah, totally.
Whereas Microsoft Teams, that's a whole different animal there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a apples to oranges.
I'm surprised how long it's taking for Project Oakdale naming convention to go away and be replaced with whatever it's going to be.
The longer they do it, the more confusing it'll be, because now everything says Oakdale. Everybody's talking Oakdale, and then they're going to come up with one day and say, "Hey, we got a new name again," and it's just going to throw everybody for a loop.
And I'm surprised that they need to wait so long, right? I mean, surely they've got a legal team that goes, "Look, here are all the trademarks we own. Here's some from back in the 1970s.
Yeah,
let's take one of those. Product doesn't exist anymore, and let's use that."
Yeah, exactly. Just go reuse a name they already own. They're probably bound to have them,
Oh yeah. So Lurianus, what did Ryan Jones, he obviously spoke last weekend at the CDS Saturday in Stockholm, or it was, centralized in Stockholm from Sweden, the whole crew up there. What did you say? Did he indicate that there might be a name, that there was a name coming, or where was it at?
I haven't heard, but I haven't really paid attention. We're on the MVP distribution list. I haven't seen anything mentioned there.
Okay.
So it's if they have a name, they're keeping it under wraps, even from MVPs.
Yeah. And they did last time as well, because the minute MVPs found out the name of Dataflex, what's the first thing anybody that's been in business that was an MVP did? Trademark search. First thing. We all did it. Like,
yep. Tweeting about it, going and getting good domain names for it.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, yeah. I mean, George Dembinski's famous for buying every domain name the minute he sees a product name that potentially it could cotton on or go somewhere.
Oh, yeah. I've done that a few times. Never had one pay off.
Nah.
You know, but it's a little bit, it might be a little cheating, right? It's a little insider information, right? Because we will hear the name before the general public does. Maybe
but nowadays it's so briefly.
I was gonna say, maybe only by minutes.
When I was first an MVP, I'd get told stuff that nobody knew for 9 months, or a year. Now you get something that's insider. You've got it for 24 hours if you're lucky, just about.
Yeah, very often it's like, here's a draft of a post that'll be going out in 2 hours about the new name Dataflex or something like that. So it gets everybody kind of scrambling.
Yeah. And of course, the whole idea of early access used to be around that if the MVP audience was educated on it, then they would field a lot of the questions that Microsoft would get because they would talk about it, post about it, that type of thing.
We were guinea pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd use us as guinea pigs for lots of things, but frankly, lots of things they would ask our opinion on, and we would all almost unanimously say, it should definitely be red, and they would come back and say, okay, we're going to stick with blue. It's like, why the fuck even ask? And then, of course, they go launch, and everybody complains about blue, and they change it to red. It's like, you wonder why did you even ask us our opinion if you're just going to completely ignore it? And now,
because of politics, mate, you know how politics works. You say one thing, mean something else. I
think that it's like they kind of almost as a last second check off. Let's run this by the MVPs after everything's been decided, everything's been built, all the assets are ready to publish, and there's no way they're going to make a change. It's almost like, let's run it by the MVP so we can see how much of a shitstorm we're going to get next week.
Well, that was back in the old days. That's not how it is now because, software development has changed. It's now so rapid and the releases so refined. I mean, even the things like the wave releases, we're only getting them at the last minute because I think it's that dynamic as into what makes it in the release and what doesn't.
The one that I recall most recently probably was the idea of renaming solutions to projects. They floated that one to the MVPs, and we all crapped all over it. And I think we crapped all over it so badly that they actually caught that one, even though there were a few assets out there that had used that term. They were able to pull that one back fairly quickly. But
I'm hearing a few complaints I've seen on Twitter and stuff around Project Oakdale and CDS and the naming conventions of things that are the same in both but have different naming conventions.
Tables and entities, attributes and fields.
I feel like it's creating some confusion as well. For me, it's kind of like, did I miss some logic here? Because why would you do that? Why would you add a further layer of complication?
Well, I think the thinking there is Project Oakdale is really intended for that citizen developer and customer use, more so than partners. And that citizen developer, if they have any experience with databases, it isn't as entities and fields. It's definitely tables and rows. I think they just decided, our largest target for this particular product thinks of these things in these terms, even though all of our dynamics people think of them in other terms. We're going to go with the bigger crowd that we're aiming at with terminology they're more likely to understand.
That Power Platform community conference was a big deal last week. I had it in my diary. I just happened to be on a Microsoft project doing work, so I didn't get to it, but I could see it was an amazing event. But Steve, back on your point that, they say that about the audience. Here's the thing. A citizen developer is only a citizen developer for around 3 months. Then they move from being a subject matter expert to being a technologist because they're like, all of a sudden, their whole career, like you have a look at all the case studies of everybody that start off as citizen developers, They've all become technologists.
Yep. I think that Microsoft has made a bet that the typical customer would prefer to build something themselves than to have it built for them.
Yeah.
And I think that is not correct. I don't think that is true. I think that there are certainly customers that would prefer to build it themselves, but I think there are more customers that just give me something that will solve my problem.
Yeah.
Just make it and hand it to me to solve my problem. That there are customers that say, nah, just give me an empty box and I'll figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
And they've made a heavy bet that that most people out there would prefer an empty box.
Well,
and,
remember, Satya is saying there's more apps that there's a demand for than people that can build it. And that was one of their big reasons for going down that path. The problem is, I just don't know, even things like a Canvas app, it very quickly becomes highly technical.
Oh, yeah.
There's no programming. There's just formulas and there's just statements and there's just strings. And all of a sudden, hang on a second, you're down a whole path and learning a whole nomenclature that you never knew of existed before.
Speaking of down a whole path, we've chewed up a whole hour.
Yeah, man. That was good.
That's good. Yeah.
Good day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's hope you found it a bit beneficial. Feel free to send through us via the WhatsApp group any kind of topics that you want us to discuss or things you want us to highlight.
Tell your mom, tell anybody to come listen in next time.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.